Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Everyday Adventure Podcast. How's it going, Megan?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It's fun to be back. I was just at camp for 2 weeks, and so we've kind of been it's been like 3 weeks since we've sat down to record.
I know. And then you leave again next week. I just totally forgot. So
yeah, I am going to Arizona for something for a few days, and so, but as much as so, I'm bummed to not be with family. Like right now, our summer is like I was gone for a fourth of it, like not in Fargo-Moorhead, which is a bummer. So I missed a few baseball games, soccer games, and stuff like that. I did have the kids with me for a week at camp, which was awesome. But next week, are we just jumping into anticipation celebration? Because anticipation right now, I get to stay with my best friend Steve Pavic. So we're sharing a hotel room at
next
the place
week?
we're going to. Yeah.
Nice.
So when we're in Arizona, we're bunking together, and we were talking on the phone yesterday, and I'm very excited. So I'm looking forward to it. There's going to be a lot of friends there. Even though it's like work related, it's just going to be a fun time of catching up with a lot of people. And so, sorry, I just kind of moved towards anticipation and celebration, but that's what I'm thinking about right now.
You're excited to have a sleepover with your friend. So that's fun.
It's not a sleepover when you're in your mid to late 30s.
No, it always is.
Is it?
Yes. I would call it that.
That's a great, just ponder this question on the Everyday Adventure Podcast. When you have a trip, when you stay with friends, is it a sleepover or not?
The people that are living with a little bit of whimsy, it's a slumber party, okay? So it's all about branding.
What's the difference between a slumber party and a sleepover?
Vibes.
Is that it?
Yeah. Late night snacks and good chats.
That is actually, I always called them sleepovers. Like when I was a kid and all my friends would come over, I would stay over there. It was a sleepover. I don't think we ever called it like, is that a slumber party? Is that just a female thing?
Well, I think it's that, but I think it's like a big one. Like a sleepover would be, okay, one, like two friends, but a slumber party is like the whole friend group is here, probably.
Yeah, but I do think, though, that was our baseball team. We did a lot of those, Petey's house or wherever, and it was usually, 8 to 10 guys, but I still can't fathom us calling it a slumber party, a slumby.
That's okay. One day you'll admit it, and it'll be great. But we all know.
And I don't even think we called it a sleepover. It was more of like we crashed at his house.
Right.
This is more of
that was just because you guys were too cool.
Yeah, we were too cool.
But
I'm glad. Thanks for listening, everybody.
That's actually it. That's the end of the episode.
We solved the problems. But is there anything that you are celebrating right now?
Celebrating right now, I am celebrating, I think, just like a sweet summer. I've had just a good routine for the summer.
Yeah.
And now that it's like light outside earlier and all of that stuff. And so I've just been really enjoying like my mornings, which hasn't always been the case. So go on morning walk and spend time with Jesus and all that. So I'm just celebrating healthy habits.
That's awesome. I love that. And I think, today we're kind of carrying on a conversation that we started a couple weeks ago. I know when we did our, making room for what matters most, it kind of sparked probably like 3 or 4 things that we're like, oh, we should talk about that next. And so today we're going to talk about margin. And what's your definition of margin? Like, how would you describe margin? And we're just going to talk about what margin is, what it isn't, how to make space or make margin, but also how to guard margin and keep the right things in that space. So I'm excited. I think there's 2 people that are listening today. There's somebody that has no margin. They feel like their calendar is just endless and it's always going. And I do think there's somebody that's like, all my life is margin. I feel like I have nothing going on. I go to work and I come home. And so I want to hit both of those people. But what's your definition of margin?
I think when I think of margin, it's the space between the big rocks in your life. So it's the space between what has to happen. So it's your time after work. It's the time on the weekends. The time is in the morning. It's the space that you have to live your life, I think. Yeah. How would you describe it?
I mean, I think that's great. I think I've always said the space between is kind of how I've defined it. If you have margin in your budget, it means that not every dollar is defined by a bill or by something that's going out in your life. So you have $200 where it's just like, that is whatever. If it's eating out money, it's eating out money. If it's a gift for a friend, it's a gift for a friend. It's undefined, but intentional. And so I think for me with time in a schedule, in a calendar, margin is really room in between, like you said, the big rocks, or room between commitments. But I think another aspect of it is capacity. It's like the space between commitments and capacity, because sometimes there's time, but there's no like me. And so just trying to figure out the difference between that. And I think what sparked this conversation, I think, was our last conversation. And you just kind of just shared a little bit of like, you have no margin. And I think you've reflected. What have you reflected on since you talked about that? Because that, I think, is guiding this conversation a little bit more too. Because you do have time, I think, is what you've realized.
Yeah. Well, I think, what you talked about is so huge. And what I really relate to is like, I have maybe time on my calendar, but I don't have time in my head and like the capacity side of it, of the mental like commitment. I think that also, like, I'm a very introverted person, so I have to recharge. And so to have a lot of commitments in a row is fine, but then it's going to take me out for a while, and I have to recharge. I have to figure that out. And so I think what I realized maybe was that my weekends are full, but my evenings aren't. And kind of what this leads to is a lack of Sabbath, I think, too, is what I'm feeling, and the lack of intentional rest. And instead, like, I want to say it's John Mark Comer, maybe, that says, like, don't live for your Sabbath, live from your Sabbath. And if you're doing it well, you're not surviving to it. You're, like, being launched into the week from it.
Right.
And so I think I'm not being launched or surviving to it. I think I'm just getting like quick hits in the evenings to be able to survive the margin.
Yeah, I think it Sabbath is margin, like in its design, in the way that God, I think, desires it for us, is that it's space between our work, it's space between our load and our limits, and it's a place for us to rest in Him, delight in Him, do the things that we enjoy, be with the people we love. And I think when we have that margin throughout the week is a little bit more of like the priorities thing. It's a little bit more of, is my time being used for the things that do matter most? Whereas if we don't have it, we're trying to fit in times throughout our week, something that I think God already has a plan for in how we can use a day of the week to recharge and to really delight in Him. And so I think there's aspects of that too that are kind of fun to talk about. But is margin laziness? I think that's just a big question. I think a lot of people, and I've known a lot of them, I've had just different stints in my life where I've been one of them, where it just feels like if I'm not doing anything, I'm in the wrong. Like I'm being lazy. I'm not being productive. I don't have, drive to do something right now. And I've almost had a hard relationship with that, of like, if I'm doing nothing, it's being lazy. So what do you think?
I think I'm the wrong person to ask. I think I'm the person in the season that struggles with that. That I think no, margin is not laziness. And there is a very clear distinction between the two. But I think it's really easy for people to view it that way, of like, and I think especially, I don't know, like in the young adult or like a single culture of like, you have all this time, do the things. And a lot of the feedback you get from married couples or other friends is like, you're never going to have more time than the time that you have now. And that's like really daunting, as much as it is also encouraging, So
yeah,
what are you supposed to do with all this time? Because you really do have time. I have time in the season that I'm in.
I think that's a great kind of question, because I do think that the habits that you form in this season will carry over as well. And so that was me when I was in my 20s, before I was married, before I had kids. I was definitely kind of, involved in a lot of things. I had, sports commitments that I was doing. So evenings was softball, and I had roommates that we were very active together, and a lot of different friend groups that I would jump in and out of. And I think the biggest thing is just what does that lead us to in that place? And so I think, again, margin is not laziness. Jesus had margin. He went to pray. He withdrew often. And then also another thing in Jesus' life is that he had a lot of space in his life to respond to what was happening then and now. So even when he was on his way somewhere, there was still margin there. Like the idea of laziness, you can have margin and be lazy, but it isn't laziness. Does that make sense? Like if your life is full of just blank space, it could be because you're lazy, or it could just be that's where you're at right now. And maybe you can speak to that of just right now, there isn't in the evenings, you don't have, like right now, just for example, I have soccer and baseball 3 nights of the week right now. And soccer has just ended, but 3 nights out of the week from 5:30 when like work is done until about 8 when we get the kids to bed, there's no blank space. And that hasn't always been the case for me.
Well, yeah, I think I have the opposite. I don't have the same commitments like scheduled out. Anything that I want to do in the season that I'm in right now, I get to choose to say yes or to say no to. And so I have to figure out how to fill that time. And you're going to fill it with something no matter what. And so if you're filling it with scrolling on social media or making dinner or meal prepping or hanging out with a friend, like that time's going to get filled doing something. And I think where my mindset really struggles with like the laziness comparison is that if it's not seeming productive, I feel lazy automatically. And so I think like, can you speak to a little bit? I know the conversation isn't totally about rest, but like, what's the difference between like intentional rest versus, I don't know, wasting time, I guess. You know, like laying in your bed scrolling on social media is different than, like, you're going to get a different kind of rest than something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something we all are trying to figure out in our own lives is what is restful. Because I think most of us, when we are done with a scroll sesh or when we're done with a Netflix binge or when we're done, we don't feel rested. You know, we sometimes feel more tired, more exhausted, or we even feel like a level of guilt that I just wasted this time. And so I think there's an important difference when it comes to what is truly restful is typically doing something that you enjoy. It's typically reading a book without frantically writing notes or cramming for something or trying to plan for something. It's sitting with a friend who you can be fully yourself with and honest with. That to me is one of the most restful things is when I'm with that person, well, Taylor or a close friend, that there's no agenda outside of just togetherness. That feels really restful. It's not restful when it's the person I feel like I have to entertain, and not in like a bad way, but just like we don't spend time together, we don't know each other that well, and so that person, it feels more work to engage the conversation. Whereas there's certain people, if there's 20 minutes of silence, it's not a big deal. It's not hurt. It's not anything other than just we both feel really comfortable. And so I would suggest like it's what is rest and making some rules about what is and what isn't, because just even there's been so much conversation and in study in the effects of social media on our bodies and the effects of just excess screen time and some of those things that we move towards when we want rest and how they actually do the exact opposite. So I think there's just a level of I need to define what is and isn't to an extent. And then the other aspect of that is, I think that Sabbath thing is when you have a day of the week to really guard that space. I don't feel that I need as much quote unquote rest during the middle of a day as I do when I miss that. So when Sunday for us is just time where we go to church and we have a slow morning and we, you know, right now it's golf season. And so when there's a big golf tournament on, I turn that on. I usually take a nap and I play baseball with the kids. And
You turn on the golf tournament to take a nap.
That's kind of what you do. That's how you watch golf. That's how my dad taught me how to watch golf.
Yeah.
And there's just these activities that are life-giving, and I'm spending time with people that I really enjoy spending time with. And having 3 young kids, it's not like we're all sitting cross-legged, sipping tea all day. It's we're playing in the backyard, we're running through the sprinklers in the summer, we're doing stuff, but it's all by design that this is a day of just delighting in each other, delighting in the Lord. When I don't have that, and we just had that recently where we were traveling and everything else, I felt by about 10 a.m. on Monday, I was ready for a nap. I was ready to just disengage from my work for a couple hours because I just wanted to just get away.
What is the idea of planned spontaneity? Because it's kind of a double negative. Like, it doesn't make sense,
Yeah. For one, margin is not just rest. Margin is, again, that space between. And so there's times where planned rest is the best way to fill margin. And then there's times where planned spontaneity is the best option. And I think most people don't have the second. A lot of people probably have scheduled rest. They sleep at night. They do different things on the weekends. And there's just levels to that. But the one area that I would probably guess that most people don't is just room on their calendar where they've set aside, I'm going to leave this open, but the reason I'm leaving it open is to respond to things that are good. And whether it's the friend that reaches out, Taylor is a great example of this. I just feel that her friends will reach out to her on a Tuesday and say coffee, or let's hang out tonight, or coffee tomorrow. And I think she's done a good job, even unintentionally, of kind of defining she has her few best friends, and she is a mom, and she has like these work commitments and different things that she has. But I think her yeses are a lot easier than mine because she has fewer options at any given time. I feel my personality, I leave so many options open, where for her it's just a little bit more defined, and so she has a lot more space. I don't know if a friend were to call, how easy it would be for me to just detach and say, yeah, I'm open right now, unless I really fight for it. And so that idea of planned spontaneity to me is just a little bit more of the designed space to say yes, when normally if I back to back everything, there's just not that space. And so sometimes that's 30 minutes during a work week where you have a call that ends at 11, and instead of scheduling your next thing at 11, you leave something open until 11:30.
If you have everything planned out that does give you rest, it's a best yes, you agree with everything that's on your calendar, but it's still full, you don't necessarily have margin, is that wrong? Like, at what point are like the warning signs that you're over your limit?
You're fine if you feel great. Like, if your calendar is full of things that you've defined that are best, so people, responsibilities, service projects, and they're all good things, they're all great things, they're all kingdom-minded things, and you feel refreshed, rejuvenated, you feel excited about them, you have no regret in that, that's one thing. But I think most people, I would argue, would say my schedule is full of good things. It's full of great things that I enjoy. It's full of opportunities that I feel very fulfilled in, but I feel exhausted. I think then you just have to ask that second follow-up question of why. Like, why, if it's truly God's best things in those moments, I don't think that it leads to anxiety. I don't think it leads to, feelings of inadequacy. I don't think it leads to any insecurities and in that side of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I think something that I struggle with, and maybe someone listening can relate to, is like saying no to things. I just have a hard time. I think I have a hard time whatever, call it people pleasing or whatever. But like, even though I might have that free Thursday, like the time that a friend's asking to do something, I don't necessarily feel like I have the capacity, or maybe that relationship like isn't restful or whatever. How do you say no to plans in a loving way, or like guarding the boundary but still like guarding the relationship too?
It's really hard. And I think even before that, I think we have to talk about availability versus capacity, because I think just because we're available doesn't mean that we have capacity. And there's levels to knowing yourself that are really important in this conversation, because if I don't know myself and what I need, like you mentioned being an introvert, I'm not like a true introvert. I don't think I'm a true extrovert in the sense that like I get really refreshed in crowds. Our friend Danielle is a true extrovert. She comes alive in that space, and then she leaves that space more peppy than when she got to it. Like I can be good in that space, peppy in that space, but I'm really tired afterwards. And then there's other people that are probably just like tired during it.
Yeah.
And knowing that you need that time afterwards, knowing that is one big step in it, is knowing, okay, the next 3 days, I should not schedule anything in the evening. Or if I do, here's the possible options. It's with this person, it's doing this craft that I enjoy. It's doing things that are going to be refilling and refreshing. Where when we don't know each other, or we don't know ourselves, we really stumble around saying yes to things and no to things, and it's because we don't have capacity in those places. So how to say no to somebody or to something: one, knowing yourself, and then two, it's saying it and being honest with yourself first, and then being honest with the person. When I've said no to people, there's times where it's a one-time thing, and then times where it's a recurring thing, and I have to know, am I saying no to one thing, or am I saying no to many things? I've been asked for somebody to mentor me, and I didn't have the capacity to do it. I knew if I said yes, I would be lying to myself that I was able to do that. I would be lying to that person. And I've done this, showing up with nothing to give and being very exhausted, being almost very negative in how I'm approaching it. Like, I just have to get through this. And I think when I started realizing that nobody else is going to guard my boundaries, and I'm accountable to God for the way I spend my time and for my yeses and nos, it definitely helped me recognize that this person asking me to mentor them weekly, I know I can't do that to the level that would be God's best. And so I need to say no to that offer, but I can counter offer of, hey, I would love to meet up with you every once in a while. I can't put a schedule on it, but if every few months we get a coffee together, or I have this book that I've really benefited from on this topic that you're walking through, I would love for you to read that book, and we could grab a coffee in a month and talk about it. Finding an alternative to that is something too. And then other times it's just, being honest with that person and just saying, like, I'm in a place that I do not have the capacity to do that. And, but I do think that I could find somebody, or I have some suggestions of somebody that could, or whatever the case is. But I feel like there's different levels to that. There's like I shared a mentorship example, but there's also just like, hey, do you want to go get beat-ups tonight? And you don't feel like you have that. I think sometimes it's just no.
So, the tagline for the episode is just say no sometimes.
I don't want this conversation to just be like, okay, how to be a jerk to people. And
I don't think it is.
But I think we are a jerk to ourselves way more often than we realize. We say no to ourselves and no to like our soul's deeper desires. And we feel bad when we say no to a friend. When we say no, I was invited to a birthday, somebody that I would consider close. It was one of those things that snuck up, and it was a time that we just had kind of set aside, a nothing night. We call it a nothing night sometimes, where it's just like there's nothing on the calendar. And that doesn't mean that we're not going to do nothing, but it's a nothing night. Well, it came on a nothing night, and I I just said thanks for the invite, but we can't make it. And I didn't give a reason. I think sometimes we feel like this obligation to give a reason or to make it sound like valid or worthy. I've just had to realize like I am worthy. You know, I struggle to say no to other people, but what I had to realize is that I was really good at saying no to the Holy Spirit. I was really good at saying no to my soul's cravings and my soul's desires. Like my soul, my spirit, however you define it, is like I just want to break. You know, like I just and then I would say yes to something else. And what I realized is I was doing the exact thing that I didn't want to do to that person to myself, and that wasn't fun either, you know. And realizing that somebody is hurting in this situation, it's actually me. And I don't think every no should hurt somebody. And sometimes we have to also check our relationships too, where if a no means hurt, we need to evaluate that relationship, you know, why that is the case, and why. Like, I feel like I've been hurt by people that have said yes but weren't there physically or, you know, emotionally. It's like, you came but you weren't here. That to me is just as hurtful. But yeah,
that it was good. I had a mentor years ago that told me, like, if you have plans with yourself, you have plans. And she was just like, if you plan to read a book tonight, then you have plans. And or if you have plans on Thursday to meal prep, you have plans. And like a lot of times I think we set aside our plans for other people, you know, because, well, yeah, that sounds fun, or that, like, yeah, I can do that. I can be there. I can help serve in this way. And you cancel on yourself, not realizing like the repercussions of that, of now you either have to find another time to do that or you're lacking the rest that you had intended and planned for. It's a lot easier to cancel on yourself, disappoint yourself, versus feeling like you're disappointing someone else.
I think an example of this is whether it's Year in Reflection or we had Slow Down Saturday. I've had a lot of people in both of those instances say like, I wish I could have. I think that's part of the issue, is that we have such a hard time making that space and giving that space. And maybe it's because we don't value it or we don't find its worth. I don't want people to hear this conversation and just think like, oh, this is just about being self-centered. It's really, I have more capacity to serve and give when I do protect the things that are most important. And that's where I think margin as a spiritual practice is different than just margin from a life practice. Because margin spiritually, it's the Jesus principle. It's, I have now more space to say yes to the best things. It's, I have an ability to, you know, minister to this woman, you know, and Jesus, who's had this issue of bleeding and 12 years, no doctors, no help. He felt power come out of him, and he turned around and he said, "Who touched me?" Jesus had hundreds of people touch him that day. You know, hundreds of people touched him as crowds pressed in against him, and she happened to touch him, and the story changes her life forever. And same with the woman at the well. Like, Jesus sat there at the well. Jesus, you know, Zacchaeus, he's on his way through that area, and he looks up in the tree and sees Zacchaeus. And so what I'm more so arguing for is that there are divine opportunities and family opportunities and things that we're missing because we have a hard time defining margin and creating it in our lives so that we can respond to the things. I call it the principle of better, you know, of betters, because Mary and Martha is working and she is cleaning and she's preparing and she's hosting and she's doing something that arguably God designed her for. Like, that was her sweet spot, and that was her responsibility in that moment, was to serve and to host, and that she was not doing anything that she wasn't supposed to. But Jesus says about Mary has chosen what is better. And I just think that I struggle in that side of things. Like, part of the margin is creating more space to sit at the feet of Jesus. It's creating more space to kind of quiet the distractions and quiet the noise. And if that's not happening in our lives, that's where I think we just need to ask the big picture question of like, is there any margin? Is there any space? And how do I get it back? And again, that might be that pickleball league that we play in, that we love, that we enjoy. Maybe for 3 to 4 months, it's saying no to that because I'm going to intentionally create space on that Tuesday night for a quiet time, where it's just me and the Lord. And what do we need? What do I need personally in that space?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think too, like, just the idea of creating space to sit at the feet of Jesus more. Like, there's so many ways to sit at the feet of Jesus. Like, there's like the quiet, reflective time reading scripture, that side of it. There's also, I think, like, sitting at the feet of Jesus is also watching, like, being available to talk to your barista and get to know someone, or to be in the pickleball league and show up and be more intentional than just playing the game, but asking questions. And like, you see the disciples in scripture, like, they were constantly at the feet of Jesus. And what was Jesus doing? Changing people's lives. And like, that's what they get to witness. And
Right.
so when you're available in your margin to like also see the world around you, like, I just think about my brother Matt, who like arguably has absolutely zero margin in his life. He is scheduled to the minute, but he's scheduled to the minute with Jesus-centered things. And so like, we've talked about his idea of, dude, you got to say no more. And he's like, but there's not a single thing that I don't feel called to and to witness to and to be a part of in this moment. Like, if I say no to this, I'm going to miss out on what God has for me in this season. And it's just an interesting, I think that's when margin is done in a healthy way, of like, he understands exactly where his time is going and why it's going there in this season. But can you speak to a little bit? I feel like there's like two like practical sides of this. There's the, like, okay, so you have no margin. How are we supposed to get margin right now? So speaking to that person that's listening, that's like, okay, I hear you. I need margin. I need space. How do I start doing that? And then there's the other side of it that's like, okay, how do I take responsibility for my margin? How do I start like owning it and not just surviving it?
I think there's one step that we'll do before that, and that's kind of what are the signs that I need margin. Because even you bringing up your brother, and there's other people that are going to be in that boat, there's still room here to evaluate. I would arguably say that was me moving to New Jersey, is that in that season I felt like I had no wasted time. I didn't play video games. I barely watched shows on Netflix. I was doing 7 to 10 one-on-ones every week. Like, everything felt very spiritual, very kingdom-minded, kingdom impactful. It would have led to my demise. Mm-hmm. Like, it didn't feel like that. It wasn't until a year later and started to actually like come to some of these principles of Sabbath and coming to these ideas of really recognizing the path I was on was unhealthy. I'm not saying that is the case for everybody. I'm just saying that was the case for me, is that I felt that every yes was the best yes, but it really wasn't. It just wasn't, because I didn't have the rootedness in Christ as much as I thought I did or should have had. So that's the difference, is somebody that can walk away from that kind of evaluation and say like, yeah, I'm very rooted in Christ, and like my love for him and my worship for him. And so it's not always, that's why no two instances are the same, but some signs you have no margin is that you always feel rushed, that you're always going from one thing to the next, and it always feels like you're running behind. Interruptions frustrate you. So again, the person that interruptions are a delight, even though they're full, that would be Jesus. Like, he had commitments that he had on his schedule per se, but interruptions were welcome, and he actually treated interruptions like a treat, whether that was kids or something else. You have no hobbies, just no things that you enjoy. You keep saying after this season. So a lot of things are seasonal defined. And I think you've talked about singleness sometimes, is that we almost kind of encourage single people sometimes, like, this is your one chance, that you'll never have this much time. There's levels of truth to that, but there's also habits that are being formed that are really hard to break. And it's why so many of us, we leave a season where we say after the season, and it's just as bad or worse. Our calendar has no white space. So when we look at our calendar, it just is completely full, especially of there's things that are missing, So if your calendar is full and everything that you want is there, and everything that you don't want is not there, like that's a win, you know. Small problems feel like big problems. You don't have time for rest or fun. You don't have time for the people that truly do matter the most to you, and you're emotionally exhausted. So that's how to help somebody hopefully
Identify
it. And then your next question was, well, how do I do it? And that's the challenge this week, is the time audit challenge. And so it's really just about going through your calendar. And if you need to track it for a week, do that and try to do it every 15 minutes. And when you do that, you're able to actually see it. And now you can actually ask the question over every chunk of time. Was that the best use of that time? Is there a better time for that? Is this how I want to spend my time? And then remove the things that don't pass that test. And there's more questions you could ask. You know, does it align with my values? Do I have the capacity? What am I saying no to by saying yes? Will my future self thank me? You know, if you ask some of those questions over your calendar as you go through your time audit, I think that will kind of help you create the space. And is how I use my evenings, how I want to use my evenings, is how I use my weekends, how I want to use my weekends, is how I use my mornings, how I use my lunch. Then it's about creating, you know, lunch is a great time for margin. The space between activities is a great time for margin. So if you get done with work at 4, don't plan anything until 6. Have those 2 hours where you can respond, or where you plan something that is restful or an intentional transition point from your day. Anything that you would add?
No, I think that's good. I think the time audit, I've done many different times in my life, a time audit, and it is always shocking where I'm putting my time and how much time I'm putting into certain things. You just don't realize it until you visualize how it is. And so I just it really is helpful to, it's like the pins in the map that we talk about. Like, it's just the you are here, just the basic, like, where are you at right now with your time?
Yeah. I love what you just said. You didn't realize it until you visualized it. And I think that's why I'm telling the person that either is a planner, and that's a personality thing too, is that type A person, it likes to time block. They like to schedule different things. They schedule meetings with themselves. They schedule. So then when you do your time audit, you're just simply, does it pass that test of, is this how I want to spend my time? Is this not the most productive use, the best use of my time? And those are different. And then for the person that never tracks their time, just kind of goes with the flow, they're able to see where the flow takes them. Because even though you're a type B person, you still have patterns in your life. You just don't know them, so when you realize it, when you visualize it, you can actually realize where that time is going. And so the time audit piece, and then this isn't necessarily a challenge, but what I've done is made some margin rules in my life. And so when I do have blank space, so one of our big ones is 8 to 10 p.m. We've realized more that Taylor's getting up early now. I've always been more getting up early. Now Taylor is too. We are both more tired. And so I think that our 8 to 10 has become more of like wind down for bed zone, but there's still space there. But we have rules for that. So I think it's having those rules, does it align with my values? Do I have capacity? What am I saying no to by saying yes? Will my future self thank me? But also a couple other things. Don't default to scrolling. Limit mindless video games and screen time. So defining those things, I think when you can calendar screen time and that kind of stuff, then you make that rule. If I have margin, if it's 4:00 and I have an urge to go to my phone, I need to have something ready to replace that time with. So bringing a Kindle or bringing a book. I know that's something that I've heard a lot of people say, is like, always have a book you want to read with you at all times. It just is a great way to fill that 30-minute space where normally you would just pick up your phone. Use those small pockets of time to send a text or a voice message to encourage someone. Build in buffer time between commitments. So just having some of those rules are always helpful. Mm-hmm. But I would love to hear from people, one, do the challenge and what did you learn? But also, what questions do you have? Like, you ask some from yourself, but I think there's other people that are thinking about their time and thinking about their space and the fact that they aren't doing what matters most and want to. And I would just love to hear what those questions are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For sure. But no, thanks for listening, and let us know. You can comment on Spotify or YouTube, or send us a message at stevenglasser.com/podcast, but also subscribe. We'd love to make sure you get all these episodes as they come out. But as always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.
See ya.